express yourself in color. Artist Robert Montes demonstrates his technique while the always colorful Penn and Teller point out some really neat ways you can use color to tell a story, create a mood, or even find a football.
I'll color it. There's more than one way I can color it.
Brush up on your coloring when Penn and Teller take you behind the scenes with Robert Montes.
See it this Sunday afternoon at 5:30 on Iowa Public Television.
Our need calls us to protect and nurture the resources that sustain a quality life. You and your family depend on Iowa Public Television. When this letter arrives, use this opportunity to protect and nurture your resource of quality television and services. Thanks to you, Iowa Public Television is a resource for Iowa's future.
Lyndon Johnson filled the air. This was his town.
I think he would have been considered a great president if he hadn't gotten involved in Vietnam.
He was frustrated because he couldn't end it and because he couldn't win it.
Few presidents knew more triumph. Few suffered such a swift and tragic fall. Watch LBJ on the American Experience.
See it here on Iowa Public Television this evening at 7.
You'll find TV worth watching here on Iowa Public Television, a resource for Iowa's future.
Acquisition of this program was made possible by Friends of Iowa Public Television, with funding for the Iowa broadcast provided by CRST, a family-owned company based in Iowa and a major truck carrier in the United States, which is proud to support the MacNeil Lehrer Newshour.
Good evening. I'm Robert MacNeil in New York.
And I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. After the news summary, we go first to the prospects for peace between Israel and Syria. We talk to the Israeli foreign minister. Next, U.S. politics. We hear from President Bush and Governor Clinton on the stump. Then essayist Jim Fisher looks at America's preoccupation with guns. And finally, CHARLAYNE HUNTER-GAULT talks with some young survivors of urban violence.
Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour is provided by AT&T and by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
In the presidential campaign today, President Bush proposed a $20 billion package of tax breaks and regulatory relief for small businesses. He told business leaders in Greensboro, North Carolina, the initiative would make it easier for people to start small businesses and to keep them healthy. Governor Bill Clinton was in Georgia on a one-day bus trip. He said if elected, he would establish a domestic equivalent to the National Security Council. He said it would examine the economic consequences of every decision his administration would make. We'll have excerpts from both candidates' stump speeches later in the program. Robin?
Family leave was the focus of partisan feuding on Capitol Hill today. Last night, President Bush vetoed a bill that mandated up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Democratic leaders plan to try to override that veto. Republicans charged they were playing election year politics with the issue. Both sides held news conferences on Capitol Hill.
It seems so cynical and so phony, that's another good word, to just continue to trot stuff out in the last couple of weeks or the 3 weeks of a session, which are destined solely to try to embarrass the president, to hurt him in the campaign, and we're not having any part of it. And when it comes up, we're describing that to the American public. Let them sort it out.
I think the president has taken on, by his position of a veto, a dreadful coalition of forces here by opposing something that the average person completely understands. All of our major competitors have family and medical leave legislation. This is unpaid leave we're talking about. I think it's going to hurt, frankly, politically, but unnecessarily so. I really don't think this is a question where people have been out to try and capture someone politically. This is one where the president has clearly imposed a self-inflicted wound on himself.
Republican senators introduced a White House-endorsed alternative offering tax incentives to businesses that provide leave. Senator Dodd called it a last-minute attempt to, quote, cover someone's backside.
The Federal Reserve today reported the economy was slowly improving in most of the nation, but it cautioned the pace of recovery has been uneven across many regions and sectors. The assessment was contained in the so-called Beige Book. Fed policymakers will use it when they meet October 6th to review interest rate and other policies.
Syria's foreign minister said today his country was prepared for total peace with Israel. But he said to achieve it, Israel would have to withdraw from all occupied Arab lands. He made the comments before a meeting in New York with Secretary of State Eagleberger. Meanwhile, the Middle East peace talks in Washington remain stalled over the issue of the Golan Heights, which Israel has refused to discuss until Syria spells out its concept of peace with Israel. Those talks have generated protests from both Palestinians and Israelis living in the occupied territories. We have a report narrated by Vera Frankel of Worldwide Television News.
Shops were closed as Palestinian radicals in the West Bank and Gaza Strip observed a one-day strike in protest against the current round of peace talks. The radicals are demanding that the Palestinian negotiators pull out of the discussions in Washington. But for some, the strike was not enough. In a violent show of opposition to the talks, they attacked Israeli army jeeps on patrol in the Gaza Strip. Israeli soldiers were quick to retaliate against the barrage of stones. The radicals oppose any compromise with Israel and have called the offer of interim autonomy in the occupied territories a conspiracy against Palestinian rights. In Jerusalem, settlers from the Golan continued their own protest against possible land concessions to Syria.
The safety of Israel requires us to stay in the Golan Heights. That a secure peace means Israel staying on the Golan Heights, not getting off of it.
They marched to the Prime Minister's office to demand that Yitzhak Rabin remember his promise to safeguard the Golan Heights, not only for Israeli security, but for the Jewish settlers.
We'll have an interview with Israeli Foreign Minister Peres later in the program. Yugoslavia has been expelled from the United Nations for its role in the fighting in Bosnia. The General Assembly took the action last night. It was the most severe diplomatic punishment ever imposed on a UN member.
At least 30 people have been killed by flash floods in France. Another 48 people are missing. The flooding was centered in the south of the country, which was hit by violent storms yesterday. High winds and water destroyed crops, tore up roads, and damaged buildings. Officials said it was the worst storm to hit the region in decades. That's it for our summary of the day's news. Just ahead on the news hour, Israel's foreign minister, Bush and Clinton on the campaign trail, Jim Fisher on guns in America, and some youthful survivors of mean streets.
First tonight, another look at the Middle East peace talks. The latest round is expected to end tomorrow after a 2-week roller coaster of optimism and pessimism about a possible breakthrough between Israel and Syria. We asked the foreign ministers of both countries to assess the talks, but only the Israeli Shimon Peres accepted for tonight. I spoke with him this afternoon. Mr. Peres, thank you for joining us. Syria's foreign minister, your opposite number, Farouk al-Shara, said today Syria is willing for total peace, for total withdrawal from the occupied Arab lands. Does the phrase total peace represent some kind of advance in the Syrian position?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no, because by saying the total description, you escape the necessary details, which is an exchange of embassies, of open borders, of economic relations. We would rather like to have it detailed.
But it's something of an advance, is it?
Yes, yes, it is, and we appreciate it. And we think that the Syrians are making a little bit of a headway in the right direction. But we have to negotiate not only the totality of the description, but the phases, the ways. There are many issues that we have to take very seriously. The security of our country, of the Syrian state, the nature of peace, the nature of the frontiers, secured and recognized, and we are willing to negotiate.
Your negotiator in Washington, Mr. Rabinowitz, said, I think last week, that there was a general outline agreement in principle on the security issues, which must, not in detail, but in principle, that must represent a significant positive step, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, we were the ones who said that when talking about security, we are referring to the security needs of Syria, not just the security needs of Israel. And we can understand the Syrian worries. We don't want to have a worried neighbor, even if we shall have peace between the two of us.
You and other Israeli spokesmen were sounding a lot more optimistic about the talks with Syria just a week ago, I think. What happened?
No, we are still optimistic. I don't think that Syria has changed. I don't think that we have changed. I think the world has changed. And when you look at the appearance of the new world in the Middle East, as it's being expressed in the Middle East, you see there is no way out of it. For many good years, for example, the Middle Eastern countries were residing on the world conflict, the competition between America and Russia, or France and England. There is no longer a conflict. So nobody provides arms, nobody provides money. We have to make a living on our own. Then I think that more than we have to face the old relationship between the neighbors or among the neighbors, we have to face the new technologies and processes in the world. We cannot run away from them. The range of a missile forces us to have a regional security. You cannot do it anymore nationally.
And makes the occupying of certain pieces of land of less strategic importance than it used to be.
That's true too. And we have to find the right compromise, because we have to face several dangers, not just one, from terror up to missiles. And we have to look for the right range of answers confronting the different menaces that we are facing. But I believe that we can find a fair solution, and Syria cannot run away, as we shouldn't run away from the opportunity.
Some reports looking at the sort of roller coaster nature, at least in the rhetoric about the talks with Syria, suggest that what really slowed it down was your Prime Minister, Mr. Rabin's order that territory not be discussed until Syria had spelled out details of what it regarded as a peace plan. Has that actually slowed down the talks?
I don't think so. Because Mr. Rabin also said, for example, that 242 comprises a territorial aspect, that
the United Nations resolution,
the United Nations resolution, that it calls for at least a partial withdrawal. So we didn't run away from the issue. I think the greatest mistake on the parts of the Syrians today is their refusal to have an open-ended negotiation. I don't understand. Why do they agree that our delegations will meet on a certain official level, and they disagree to have the meetings between the leaders of the countries?
You tried to meet the Syrian foreign minister today, I believe, and he refused to meet you. That's right, here in New York.
It's not me or him, it's the heads of states. You know, the Syrians would like to have the Egyptian prize, but they are not ready to use the Egyptian charm or the Egyptian approach.
You mean Mr. Assad is not willing to go to Jerusalem or to receive Mr. Rabin in Damascus?
Exactly. And we don't understand. Today we're living in a talking world. Everybody talks to everybody.
Are you trying actively to promote a summit conference?
Not just a summit conference. We would like to have an ongoing negotiation on all levels, where people who have the authority to make decisions can meet people on the other side with the very same authority.
And so far the Syrians are not going along with that?
The Syrians are running away from it. They are very shy on it. You know, a minister or a prime minister can afford making a mistake. Nobody will fire him. And it is upon those mistakes that we make some progresses in our negotiations, or what I call mistake. We have to have a negotiation in a little bit of the twilight not everything being so clear and published, and we have to try different approaches, to think aloud, to suggest maybe creative ideas. And I'm afraid that today the negotiations are simply too narrow, too dry, too low.
Is that what caused Mr. Rabin to say to a parliamentary committee yesterday that he doubted Syria is ready for a full peace?
Until now, the doubt stemmed from the fact that when they were talking about the Golan Heights, they were very earthly. When they were talking about peace, they were very heavenly. I mean, without any definition, who should make peace with whom, on which occasion. And we are trying very hard to bring them down to earth on peace as well, and not just on territories. And it is needed, because don't forget that Israel is the party that has to give, which is on the giving side. Israel is the party that has to take the risks. And we have to face a skeptical public opinion, not to ignore a part of our public opinion which opposes this give and take position.
Are you and your Prime Minister completely in sync on this? I mean, you're old political rivals, as everybody knows. You, using your old contacts in France, got the French Foreign Minister, Mr. Roland Dumas, to use his influence with the Syrians. And then I've seen it reported that Mr. Rabin put a stop to that and said, no, only one channel for contact, and that's through the talks in Washington.
No, I don't think that's the case. You see, we are conducting a negotiation on two tracks. One is the bilateral tracks, which is face-to-face, delegation vis-a-vis delegation in Washington, without any intermediaries. Then we have the multilateral negotiations, where the Europeans are involved, and Americans are involved, and many other countries, and this is a sort of an open channel negotiations, and we want, I think, both Rabin and myself, to mobilize every ounce of goodwill and every person that can help to bring the parties together. The multilateral negotiations excelled itself by the fact that 14 different Arab countries came to negotiate together with us about the future of the Middle East on 5 different subjects. The problem is that this is highly disorganized. I mean, the negotiations look like a seminar rather than like a negotiation. It's being spread all over the world, at different places, on different times. It doesn't have a central steering committee.
So you think the only way to focus this and give it the kind of energy and authority it needs is to raise it, at least part of it, to a higher level, at your level or the Prime Minister's level?
Yes, about the steering committee. I mean, the 5 delegations or the 5 committees can remain on the present level, but we would like to have a steering committee made of ministers or prime ministers, where we can again exchange freely untested ideas or some creative solutions, which is so needed.
That sounds as though you don't think you're going to make progress with Syria unless you get to that level, is that?
No, I think differently. I think that even if we shall solve the bilateral disputes, peace shall never be guaranteed in the future unless we shall build a new Middle East. A Middle East for the people instead of a Middle East for the leaders. Until now, all the time, we are trying to satisfy a small number of leaders, whereas the masses of the people in the Middle East are suffering from starvation, from need of water and land and hope, and they compare their situation with other nations. We have to build a new Middle East that will have a market economy, open commerce, pluralistic organizations, respect for human rights. You know, when the United States, for example, in Helsinki, introduced the human rights issue, many people thought that this is a naive, almost a church-like intervention. It came out that it has found the Russians unprepared on such an important issue, and it pushed them to a corner. It became a very powerful instrument in the negotiation. We feel very strongly today in the Middle East that we have to do likewise, to tell, after all, what is the purpose of our negotiation, if not to provide all people, Arabs and non-Arabs, Israelis and non-Israelis, with a different future.
Well, in that connection, are the countries like other Arab countries, for instance, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, which benefited from the intervention during the Gulf War, are they actively behind this peace process? Or are they just watching it indifferently? Or are they sabotaging it?
No, they're not sabotaging it. I think deep in their hearts, they understand that this is the best option for them as for us. But again, they are not ready to stand up in the open and say, let's put the agenda on the table. Let's talk, as President Sadat used to say, like civilized people. Let's bring an end to the shyness, to the separations, to the fears, and bring a new future to all of us.
Can Syria make that breakthrough on its own without the other countries of the area, Arab countries, standing up and urging it to? Can Syria go alone, do you think, now?
Yes.
It can.
Yes. As Egypt could. And President Sadat has shown that he can be a pioneer of peace. And while for a long time he was criticized, today there is a revival of respect to his memory. He emerges today, I believe, in the eyes of many people in the Middle East as a real leader who took the right decisions.
Well, Mr. Peres, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Later this afternoon, a senior U.S. official said the Syrian foreign minister had talked to acting Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger. The American official said, "We've heard something interesting from the Syrian, and that would be passed on to Israel in the hope it could help in the peace talks."
Coming up on the NewsHour, speeches from the campaign trail, a Jim Fisher essay on guns, and some young survivors of urban violence. Next, we continue with our series of stump speeches from the presidential campaign trail. Both candidates were in the South today. We hear first from Governor Clinton. This morning, he and Senator Al Gore were in Columbus, Georgia, to kick off a one-day bus tour through the state. Here are extended excerpts from the governor's speech.
We know the Cold War is over. We know that freedom and democracy and independence and human rights prevailed in the communist world over totalitarianism, over dictatorship, over the notion that a few people in government could plan the lives of hundreds of millions of others. And so in the course of a few years, after almost 5 decades of effort, we have seen the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, the demise of the Soviet Union itself, and the weakening of communism even in China, where freedom is trying to rear its head again. So the question is not, in the face of this, how much can we cut defense? The question is, what kind of national security threats are there now, and what kind of defense do we need? And if we don't need as much money as we used to, and we don't need as many people as we used to, what are we going to do with the money and the people to make America stronger at home, not weaker? There are significant challenges to us in the world we're living in. What does that mean? I conclude that it means we need not so many people in uniform as we used to have. We need not so many people in Europe as we used to have, because the Europeans don't face the imminent threat of a large Soviet army marching across Eastern Europe into Western Europe. We need not so much money spent on the space-based portion of Star Wars, but we do need to focus on greater training and mobility of our forces on land, in the air, and on the sea, and on maintaining the enormous technological lead we have in the development of both tactical offensive and defensive weapons, which means we have to maintain a strong infrastructure of technology in this country, and we have to continue to train, equip, and work with our military forces at a smaller level to make sure they are still the strongest, the best, and now the most mobile in the world, hopefully being able always to be used in cooperation with our allies. That is the defense plan I have put forward to the American people in this election. It will require us to spend less money than we are now spending, but I think it will give us a stronger national defense than Mr. Bush's proposed budget. Under my budget, we would spend somewhat less money, about 95% as much as he proposes to spend over the next 5 years, but we would spend it differently. We would spend more of it on forces here at home, keeping the Guard and the reserves combat ready. We would spend more of it on weapons systems and on greater mobility, airlift and sea lift. We would spend less in Europe and less on the space-based portion of Star Wars. Now, if we do that, it is perfectly clear that no matter which budget is adopted, or if a third budget is adopted, there will be reductions in defense spending, just as there have been since 1988. So the question then becomes, what do you do with the people who are affected by the reductions in defense spending, and what do you do with the money? If you look at what we have done, I would argue that we haven't done a very good job. Most of the money from defense cuts has been lost into a ballooning budget deficit to pay for the S&L bailout and exploding health care costs. Not surprisingly, therefore, there have been massive job losses among the people who won the Cold War, from the scientists and engineers to the technicians and the factory workers. The question is, what are we going to do with them? We need those people. We know there are all kinds of challenges we still face to make America strong. So I have recommended taking every dollar by which we reduce defense and reinvesting it in building the American economy and in finding something for the people to do who won the Cold War to make us strong in its aftermath. Take the money. Take the money and use it to rebuild our transportation systems, our communication systems, our environmental cleanup, to develop new technologies that will help us to deal with the problems here at home. Take the money and use it to increase our investment in governmental labs, doing research with private companies, to find new technologies that can be used for dual purposes, for defense and for domestic needs. Take the money and use it to retrain defense workers and people who used to be in the service, and to retool industries and to rebuild communities. This is an election in which we in our time are called upon to fulfill the eternal obligation of Americans to keep our country forever changing, forever young, forever ahead of history's curve. And we must do that when it comes to national defense, national security, to converting the energies and the abilities of our people to the rebuilding of America's economic engine, so that we can continue to keep alive the American dream that in this country, whatever your race, your income, your region, your walk of life, if you work hard, you'll be able to live up to the fullest of your potential. We are not there today. This election is one which will determine whether we will be there tomorrow. Thank you very much.
This morning, President Bush was in Greensboro, North Carolina, where he spoke to small businessmen. Here are excerpts from his remarks.
I've come here to Greensboro to talk about small business and really to drive home for the nation the fact that businesses, like the ones that come together in the triad business community, generate the hope and pride and the jobs that hold America together. Helping small business reach for its dreams is the key to my agenda for American renewal. Now, let me detail, and some of this is quite detailed, what my program does. First, it will help small businesses get started. You see, many new businesses literally begin at home, when entrepreneurs convert their own nest egg into capital. Germany does not tax capital gains at America's punitive rates. Neither does Japan. One of them is, I believe, it's 0%, and the other, I believe, is Japan is 1%. And if we want to compete and win, it's time to reward the risk takers who turn their dreams into tomorrow's jobs. It is time to cut the tax on capital gains. Today I want to take our efforts one step further. I'm proposing a 5-year, $20 billion small business initiative to lift tax and regulatory burdens off the back of small businesses and to cut the costs of capital. And we start by knocking down the corporate tax rate on small businesses from 15 to 10%. And this new initiative will smooth the way for small business startups by increasing the small business deduction limit from $10,000 to $25,000. And it will allow entrepreneurs to deduct $2,500 of those startup costs that most of you remember in the very first year. And part 3 of this small business program is to help existing small businesses find credit. The best idea in the world cannot work without capital, and entrepreneurs simply can't do it alone. They need credit to set up shop and to expand. And right now, you and I know that the credit crunch has hit small businesses hard. And that's why we've been working with bankers and regulators across the country to free up the flow of credit to companies like yours. Now, fourth, we have got to help small businesses hire new workers and increase productivity. And fifth, we've got to free small businesses from the tangle of red tape and regulation. Filling out federal forms should not be a full-time job. And that's why in January of this year, I ordered a freeze on federal regulations. You work long and hard for your success, and you should spend your time doing business, not doing paperwork. And finally, we've got to help small businesses provide for their workers, to help the 15 million Americans who are self-employed. So I want to raise the deduction for health insurance from 25 to 100%. And I want to reform health insurance. Give small companies the same advantage that bigger companies have when they shop for health care coverage by encouraging small companies to pool together to buy insurance. We want to create tax incentives to help small businesses offer their employees family leave, not do what the liberal Congress wants me to do, slap another mandate on small businesses' back. I'm not going to do that. I believe in family leave, and I believe our approach to facilitating family leave through tax credits is a far better way than putting new mandates on a guy who's struggling to make ends meet and would have to lay off people to meet the costs of that program. We want to expand small businesses' ability to offer the portable pensions people will need in a dynamic economy. And taken together, that's a strong package, a comprehensive package to give real-world help right now to the small businesses that make this economy grow. You'll notice a lot of it through tax relief is removing the burden of government from the back of small business. Now, I think it's fair to say and ask dispassionately, what about my opponent? What is his plan for small business? The difference could not be sharper. You see, I see small business as the backbone of the American economy. And Mr. Clinton, Governor Clinton, sees small business as the goose that lays the golden eggs. Bill Clinton's got big plans for bigger government, and to pay for it, he's got the tax plan for almost every day of the week. Start with $150 billion in new taxes. That's not my saying he's doing it. This is what he actually has proposed. 2 out of every 3 people hit by Governor Clinton's tax hike would be small business owners or family farmers. And these folks are not millionaires. They are mom and pop incorporated, and we cannot let him slap a tax on small business.
Our series of stump speeches will continue next week.
We close tonight with two perspectives on violence in America. The first is that of essayist Jim Fisher of the Kansas City Star.
Pictures from the LA riots still stick. Not the pall of smoke over one of the great cities, the burning stores, the seeming joy of the looters.
It's this with a short barrel.
What stuck is this: gun stores full of people, forking over cash, checks, and plastic for guns. They had to have a gun. In May, Californians bought 58,000 of them, up 45% over the same period a year earlier. Double or quadruple that number with back alley sales, plus your cousin sending that old Colt automatic out from Nebraska via UPS. Then you may scratch the surface. How many guns are in private hands out there? Lots.
Fire, very good.
And who can forget the image of the two armed shopkeepers returning fire, they said, at looters. There were no cops around, no National Guard, just two guys standing their ground. At that moment in time, guns worked. Think that didn't send a message to the people who flocked to buy guns in the following weeks? Or make people who consider themselves civilized and sophisticated at least think about getting a gun? Face it, this country is awash in guns. What the police seize from the bad guys is a mere fraction of what's out there. What's collected by do-gooders with cash, the so-called gun amnesty programs, is a drop in the bucket. What's real is the kid blown away by a drive-by shooting in the ghetto, or the suburban split level, where domestic discord turns the kitchen into a shooting gallery, with a resultant body bag coming out the front door. What's just as real is the fear, the barred windows, the slow response time of the cops, the broken criminal justice system. How many of us haven't secretly cheered when someone like Bernie Getz, thought by street punks to be an easy mark, pulls out a gun and blasts away? Like it or not, that standing up for yourself is American. Far from the talk shows and the congressional hearings, the verbiage over the fine points of exactly what the Second Amendment does mean. The non-cultural elite has guns. Some collect them, like these of mine. This old octagon-barreled Winchester 32-20. These 19th century Colt revolvers. And this post-Civil War trapdoor rifle. Okay, I like history, but they all work. But you don't have to be plugged into the gun world to get a hold of some pretty hairy stuff. Earlier today, I made a couple phone calls, took a short drive, and borrowed some weapons from two acquaintances. This is an HK-91. This is something called an SP-89, an AR-15, a MAC-10, an AK-47, the famous Uzi, and finally this thing, a semi-automatic shotgun called a USAS-12, probably the scariest of the bunch. Two phone calls, a short drive, and me, the guy that lives on a farm in Kansas, I come up with an arsenal, stuff that gives law enforcement nightmares. Weapons like these are all over. Just look at these ads. 50 caliber machine guns, shorty pump sawed-off shotguns, Thompson submachine guns, you name it. How can this be? Well, you go to the gun show. You use a little ingenuity with books like these. You spend some money, and voila, you've got a MAC-10. Legal? In the real world, that probably doesn't matter. Legal or not, people who have guns like these have plans if any restrictions are put on them. Stuff like this will go under floorboards, in the attic, get hidden someplace.
Yes, sir.
What do you got in just a pretty good automatic? Still, if building an M16 from scratch is too much trouble, come to Kansas or dozens of other states. Get yourself a driver's license. Go to a gun shop. Plunk down your money and walk out the door. It's that easy. It'd be nice if there were no guns except for hunting and if people fought with their fists to settle their arguments. Having to get in close to fight and maybe get hurt yourself in the process might deter a lot of hotheads. But that won't happen. Not with the current lack of political will or grassroots support, or what you buy your kids in the toy stores, see at the movies, or watch on television. Maybe the best we can do is wear t-shirts like this one I dug out of the wash with its simple message. It ain't Kansas? Well, let's hope not. Not yet. I'm Jim Fisher.
The LA riots have faded from the headlines, but the violence that fueled those riots continues to snuff out the lives of many young people living in America's inner cities. CHARLAYNE HUNTER-GAULT recently spent some time with a unique group of New York City youths who are doing everything they can to increase the peace.
Of Manhattan lies a quieter place, Roosevelt Island, and there sits a building that time and society have seemingly forgotten, Goldwater Memorial Hospital. Its patients are those who can't afford to go anywhere else. Back in the 1930s, they were TB patients, then polio. Now, many of the victims of New York's urban wars end up here. Young men and women paralyzed and maimed from the weapons of urban terror, guns, knives, and even cars. But several of these patients are no longer content to remain in obscurity. They formed a group called Power, people opening the world's eyes to reality. They are united by both their paralyzing injuries and their commitment to spreading the word of nonviolence. Recently, the group came to Thomas Jefferson High School, a Brooklyn school that saw 2 students shot and murdered in the same day last winter.
I'm Pedro Quiñones, age 21, gunshot victim, became paralyzed from the chest down, lost the use of my hands along with it. Took only 1 bullet to do this to me, 9mm. What happened was I was standing in front of my building with a 5-year-old kid, and a shootout broke out. Some drug dealers were fighting over territory, so they started a shootout. And I turned around and grabbed the kid, and I got hit. None of y'all here in this room know what it is to be in a wheelchair, and I hope y'all never do get a chance to experience it, because it's hard, you know. Right now, I gotta depend on everybody to do everything for me. If I got a glass of soda, a glass of water on top of the table, if they don't give me that water or that soda, I won't get it. I can't get it on my own. I gotta depend on people to wash me up, people to dress me up, people to put me in a wheelchair, to push me around. And it's difficult, you know. It's like my life was taken away. You know, it doesn't belong to me anymore. And y'all don't know that bullet is not, a bullet is not prejudice. It would hit anybody of any age, any race, female or male, baby or grown up or anything.
Octavio Marin is an assistant administrator at the hospital and works closely with the group, which he helped organize.
Our members of the Power organization, they all had money, one way or another. Most of them the other way. By selling drugs, they had the gold, they had the jewelry, they had the cars, they had the women, they had the sneakers. Where is that all now?
86, I got shot in the leg. 87, I got shot in the back. I went to jail at end of 87. Came out 89. 1990, I got stabbed in the back. I had my red Mazda. I was making $7,500 a week. It wasn't worth it. You know what it was like to me? Know what it was like? Waking up the next morning like watching Cinderella. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't last. That fast lane does not last.
Jerome Wheeler was a young man of the streets. He had been involved in drug smuggling, drug selling. He would sell guns, you name it, contracts, the whole works. He was also shot on 2 other occasions, except the 2 other occasions didn't paralyze him. It was a stab wound to the spine that finally put him in a wheelchair and finally opened his eyes to reality.
Hello, my name is Donna Hyatt, 22 years old. I wasn't a gunshot wound. I was in a car accident. I was hit by 2 cars. And me and my mother, we think that was done on purpose because of all the wickedness that I was doing out there, stealing cars, selling drugs, running around with my friends wanting to look fly and this and that. You know, but that's not the way. It's not even worth it. When I was 14 years old, I was making $100 a day. And in 1984, that was a lot. $700 a week, that was a lot. What I'm saying is, though, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. You know, get your education, stay in school. You know, I'm trying to get back into school. You know, I'm in college now. I'm going to be attending college. You know, I'm trying to do positive things with myself, try to turn my life around. But do you see all the things that I had to go through in order to just turn myself around? Y'all don't have to go through that. That's why we came here to talk to y'all. So maybe somebody will get the message and y'all don't have to go through what we've been through. Peace.
Mr. Wilson Murphy, or better known as the Murph.
The doctors told my mother, Miss Murphy, he's not gonna make it. He's not gonna make it. And if he does make it, he's gonna be a tomato. Now, I was 199 pounds solid when I got shot. I was in the weightlifting, picking up women. You know what I'm saying? I was in the boxing. I used to take my son to the gym. We used to, you know, put on the gloves. I can't do that no more. I got to box him from the wheelchair. And now he's kicking my butt. And he's only 8 years old.
Murphy was hit 5 times, 4 times with an Uzi through the body, and 1 time in the head with a 9mm bullet, which is still lodged in the brain. So he was an innocent bystander.
I know what it feels like to be 16, 17. Can any one of these students tell me how does it feel to be 31 years old? No. In other words, I've been where you at. You know what I'm saying? What I'm saying, yo, stop that macho bullshit. Take that energy and convert it into something positive.
In talking to some students after the power group left, it was clear their message got through.
They are a reflection of us in the mirror. It's the same situation, the same age, the same area, and the same type of things. And they got into it, so it just shows us if we get into it, we could be exactly like they are.
Because first it was like, people in the wheelchair, what they doing here? Well, we know they're not going to dance. I know that was the reaction of some of them, because they're used to people coming in here dancing for them or singing for them and everything and performing. I mean, just listen sometimes. That's what they have to do, listen. And once they got beyond the shock of the wheelchair, it was like they had something important to say to me. So that's when it really hit them.
Being like Black and Hispanics, they see, physically, they see that there's their own kind, their own culture happen to them, okay? They're paralyzed. They can't do nothing for themselves. So it should get through everybody, every teenager in the school mind, all right? It should get through the head.
They didn't lie to us or nothing. They told us exactly what happened, and they told us everything. You can see everybody listening. Everybody was paying attention, you know.
One of the power group's members, too sick to attend the Jefferson talk, was Eddie Matos. He, in fact, came up with the idea for the group and was himself a student at Thomas Jefferson. He was shot and paralyzed at the age of 16.
His mother was killed when he was 12 years old. His mother was brutally murdered, and it left him pretty much on his own.
Rape, throat slice. They dumped on the Bell Parkway. Ever since I heard about that, you know, I just changed. You know, I just didn't care about nothing.
Eddie had to figure out a way to survive, and he began to sell drugs and sort of develop a drug empire by age 16. This resulted in his accident, which was a bullet to his neck, which left him paralyzed from the neck down and is on a respirator.
Shortly after their talk at Jefferson High, I sat down with Eddie Matos and some of the other power group members at Goldwater Memorial Hospital. I spoke with them about their lives and their beliefs about what needs to be done to stop urban violence.
Eddie, what's your medical situation since you've been shot? What's happening to you now?
I just stay in my bed and I don't be wanting to get up because I get a lot of spasms. It's depressing for me because I just don't want to get up because it's depressing. I'm only 18 years old.
Murphy?
I have movement all through my body. You know, I have a bullet enlarged in my head, and that controls, you know, part of my body. You know, it's just that the bullet in my head, it prevents me from walking. I lost a sense of smell, and I can't smell, and I have a tendency to stutter now. But other than that, and, you know, I have to accept this, you know, because this is a part of life, and I can't go around saying, why me, why me? I have to get on with my life, you know.
Like Murphy, Larry Cooper was an innocent bystander, injured while he was being robbed, shot 4 times, causing paralysis from the neck down. How do people treat you? What's your...
Like baby sister, she used to play with me, like, but when she first came to see me, she wouldn't come near me. And that made me feel bad because, you know, before, she used to jump around, jump on. But then when she saw them tubes and stuff coming out of me, she like rejected me. And that's what really got me really upset, you know.
Once that bullet into your body, it's a whole new world for you. I mean, you even get to the point where you want to kill yourself, but you got to be strong-minded. You got to have the will to live, you know.
Did you ever get to that point, Dawn, that you didn't want to live anymore? You told me in the hall.
Yeah, when I came here to go water, and I found out I had to use a wheelchair to get myself around. You know, these are my legs. I just wanted to lay in the bed and die.
So I didn't want to live no more. I couldn't picture myself in this chair. And if it wasn't for my mother, I wouldn't have been living right now because I was underage. Because when they asked to put the trach in my throat, I refused. But since I was underage, my mother had to sign the papers and stuff, so...
Are you glad she did it?
Yeah.
You don't sound sure.
I'm glad she did it because it's not all that bad as it seems, you know.
But it's pretty bad.
It's bad, but you get used to it.
Mm-hmm. Those of you who were involved in situations that were violent or potentially violent, did that ever did that have no effect on you? Did that bother you, Dawn, at all? I mean...
Not at that time, because I was only thinking about one thing. I've been shot at, but thank God it missed, you know. I didn't even really think about it at that time. All I wanted was money, you know, to live the life of the rich and famous. So I didn't really think about it then. I was like, I know a lot of people. You know, I know people, so I don't think it's going to happen to me. I never thought it would happen to me.
Did you feel that way, Eddie? It wouldn't happen to you?
Yeah, it's the same way I felt, you know. I seen people get murdered. I seen people get shot at right in my face, you know. And I just looked at it like it wasn't nothing, you know. I never thought it would come down for me to be like this, you know. I always thought, damn, I just ain't care. I just want to make that money, you know.
So what message are you trying to put out there?
Put the guns down, pick up the books. That knowledge is the key to success, you know. And if you live in a drug-infested neighborhood, that doesn't mean you gotta hang out there, you know. Look for where the quiet neighborhoods is at, you know, like that. Keep away from the drug dealers and from wherever you see violence.
So all I got to say is, don't think like me and go on and do something better than what I did, because it ain't worth it.
You feel that there are things that ought to be done out there in the streets, in society, that aren't being done now, that might prevent the kinds of things that happen to you? Murphy, you shaking your head.
The politicians should give something back to the community, you know, because it's a shame that the kids don't have nowhere to go, and they're a restless breed, you know what I'm saying? So they looking at the drug dealers, and they figure, well, I'm not doing anything. I feel, you know, when I was growing up, we had drug centers, we had youth centers, we had places we can go after the schools closed, you know. We also had guys come around with the big brother role, you know, played big brothers and took us out on trips and stuff.
That made a difference?
Yeah, that made us different, because look, the people that I grew up with, most of them don't even have a record. You know, I don't even have a record, and I'm 31 years old. But when I went to Rikers Island, I seen all them young brothers in there. These guys got records. These guys got felonies, you know. Kids get more recreation inside the jail than they do out in the community. So it's like a resort to them.
Dawn, let me ask you this. if there were more centers, places for young people to go, do you think a young person like yourself would have been into any of that? I mean, would that make a difference, you think?
If I was aware of it, yes, it would have made a difference because I come from a single-parent home. And my mother, she always had to work all the time. And I was always over my grandmother's house. I wanted to go out, you know, and so I went out and found out the wrong way. If there was a place for me to go, then maybe I would have went there instead of to, you know, the negative.
What about guns, Pedro? Getting guns off the street, gun control. Do you think that would make a difference? How much of a difference?
I think it'll make a big difference because the less guns are out there on the streets, the less bullets are going to be fired and the less people are going to be getting hurt.
How hard was it for you to get a gun? Eddie, how hard was it to get?
It was no problem for me.
You favor the death penalty for people who shoot other people or kill them?
No, but I think the guy who shot me, I think he already favored the death penalty. I think he already got the death penalty.
Oh, you think he's been done away with?
Yeah. So I don't know.
This changed your life and your outlook on life and yourself?
Definitely, definitely. I thought that for the rest of my life, all I would be doing is standing on that same corner, you know, selling those drugs, but I'm glad that God showed me there was another way for me to go besides that. I don't have to be bothered.
Since I got hurt, I come to realize my profession is counseling, talking to the young kids, helping kids that don't have parents.